4:30 a.m., December 19th, 1944. 26-year-old Major William Desobry and a scratch task force, charged with defending the small village of Noville, are woken by the sounds of mechanized vehicles and gunfire. A column of German half-tracks has just stumbled upon one of his roadblocks before retreating to relay the location of the American defenders. Major Desobry does not know it yet, but his small group of just 400 men will soon have to hold off the full force of the entire 2nd Panzer Division. It is the morning of December 16th, 1944. Across the front lines in Europe, American forces are calmed by reports of understrength German forces and an overall lack of willingness to fight. Then, seemingly out of thin air, 400,000 German troops pour out of the densely forested Ardennes. The American units at that location are completely caught off guard. The 6th Panzer Army in the north, the 5th in the center, and the 7th in the south make considerable gains in every direction, particularly with the 5th Panzer Army, which makes considerable gains towards its objectives of Bastogne and Noville, two critical road junctions in Belgium. Control of these towns will be vital for the Germans' plan to take the Allied port at Antwerp. Poor weather conditions and doubts of initial reports lead to the American response being slow and delayed. In the center, opposing the 5th Panzer Army, is the 28th and 106th Infantry Divisions. The 106th Infantry Division is green. It is brand new, a replacement on the lines, and has been placed in the Ardennes for repair and refit. The 28th Infantry Division, on the other hand, is battle-hardened, but they are also in the Ardennes region to refit after their brutal battle in the Rhein forest. The 28th and the 106th put up tenacious resistance, delaying the German timetable so that they cannot reach Bastogne by the time they're supposed to. By the 2nd day of the battle, however, the 28th Infantry Division is near collapse. Major General Troy H. Middleton, commander of 8th Corps, receives Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division to assist in the defense of Bastogne. At the same time, General Eisenhower, commander of Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, releases Schaefer reserves of the 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions, which had both been in refit after their recent operations. The 101st is quickly rushed to the Bastogne area. However, they will not get there in time if the 2nd Panzer Division is able to continue in its northeastern route and capture Bastogne before the 101st can arrive. In response, Combat Command B splits into 3 teams. Team Cherry, under Lieutenant Colonel Henry Cherry, heads to Longueville in the east of Bastogne. Team O'Hara, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Jim O'Hara, heads to Warden to the southeast of Bastogne. And finally, Team Desobry, under the command of Major William Desobry, heads to Noville in the northeast, right in 2nd Panzer Division's path. Desobry's men arrive at 11 p.m. and find the town completely deserted. At first, it appears to be a good location for defense, considering there are open fields in front of the town to the east, in the direction where the Germans will be coming from. However, in the darkness and fog, Desobry's men do not spot the surrounding ridgeline that offers high ground looking directly down into the town center. Desobry dispatches patrols to each of the 3 roads leading into Noville. Each patrol consists of a depleted platoon of infantry as well as a section of 2 Shermans. American stragglers from the front line trickle through each of these outposts, exhausted from their battle with the Germans. Each one of them tells horror stories of huge German armor formations piercing through American lines. Desobry is authorized to take the stragglers within his own defenders, but for most of them sends them to the rear. The stragglers are just too shell-shocked from their battle to be of any use to the defenders. Unbeknownst to Desobry's men, they will soon have to face the full weight of 2nd Panzer Division. To combat them, Desobry only has 15 Shermans, 5 Stuart light tanks, a company of infantry and half-tracks, 3 armored cars, 6 jeeps, and 5 M10 Hellcat tank destroyers. By 4:30 a.m., no more stragglers come through the front lines, and Desobry's men feel an eerie silence descend upon the town. After the initial encounter of German half-tracks at the first outpost, a column of German armor approaches a second outpost and destroys both Shermans, as well as displacing the platoon of infantry. However, they are disoriented in the fog and do not press on into Noville. Instead, the lead elements of 2nd Panzer Division prep for a morning attack. These forward elements of 2nd Panzer Division consist of 5,000 men, 12 Panthers, 36 Panzer IVs, 6 Hummel self-propelled guns, 72 half-tracks, 15 anti-tank guns, and 120mm mortars. At 8:30 a.m., an armored column roars down the main road leading into Noville. emerges from the fog right in front of Noville's defenses and begins pummeling the American defensive line with shells. However, the dug-in GIs surprise the attackers, knocking out several of the tanks with AT and Sherman fire. The burning holes of the first two knocked out tanks block the road into Noville, and the rest of the column scatters, going off-road to avoid the two burning vehicles. However, the ground has become wet due to melted snow, and many of the vehicles become bogged down and stuck. The GIs pour machine gun fire into the half-tracks and trucks, killing many German infantry, who rapidly dismount for a panicked defensive line. The attack is beaten back by 10 a.m., but by then the fog lifts, and Desobry realizes the predicament he and his unit are in. The ridge to his southeast is crawling with over 30 German tanks, and Desobry realizes that the Germans can pummel him with artillery fire from these ridges without the need for a daylight attack. Soon, however, a line of 14 tanks approaches the town from the edge, coming from the ridge. The American GIs open up with 50 caliber machine gun fire, but watch as their rounds spark harmlessly off of the frontal armor of the Panthers and Panzer IVs. The tanks roll towards the town uninterrupted, but when they are only 200 yards out, a thick fog envelops both sides, obscuring the battlefield and causing the tanks to temporarily stop their advance. In the meantime, small groups of German infantry probe the American defenses and try to enter the town from every side. However, the Americans are able to beat back all of these attacks, pouring lead into these German infantry waves, causing massive casualties. In the middle of the rapidly approaching tank assault, 4 M10 tank destroyers arrive in the town as reinforcements. They are immediately pressed into the front lines as soon as they arrive, and by the time they are dug into the American front line, the fog lifts. The now stationary German tanks are easy targets for the M10 tank destroyers, whose 76mm gun can penetrate the armor of a Panther or Panzer IV. The Hellcat tank destroyers make quick work of the German line, destroying 10 of the 14 enemy vehicles, while the rest reverse, leaving the fields in front of Noville littered with burning vehicles. Despite beating back this second attack, Desobry is still worried about the surrounding ridgeline, in particular the threat of German artillery. He phones his commanding officer, Colonel William Roberts, who asks about the size of the enemy force. Desobry replies, "Looks like a reinforced tank battalion." Desobry cannot grapple with the fact that he is dealing with an entire Panzer Division. Colonel Roberts leaves it up to Desobry to decide whether or not to withdraw, but sends a battalion of paratroopers to reinforce him, particularly 1st Battalion, 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne Division, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel James Laprade, a 30-year-old West Point graduate. Lieutenant Colonel Laprade has been with the division since D-Day and is a battle-hardened combat leader. Relieved, Desobry and Laprade begin planning a counterattack to maintain their hold on the town and hopefully eliminate the threat of German artillery. At 2:30 p.m., the paratroopers begin their assault, with Abel, Baker, and Charlie companies of 1st Battalion sprinting through heavy fog while supported by mechanized elements of Team Desobry. At the exact moment that Charlie Company crests the ridgeline, they hear the unmistakable sound of German tank engines starting in the surrounding forests. The Germans have planned an attack at the exact moment that the Americans have begun theirs. German artillery and Naval-Werfer rockets fall and crash around the paratroopers as they desperately create a defensive line to engage the approaching Germans. Despite putting up a tenacious fight, the paratroopers are forced to retreat by the weight of German numbers. The Americans retreat back into Noville with German armor hot on their heels. The battle becomes what Major Desobry will later recall as a barroom brawl. Dozens of German tanks roll towards the town, with the defenders putting up a valiant resistance. Armed with little more than M1 rocket launchers, American infantrymen try their best to knock out the German tanks. After hours of brutal street-to-street urban combat, and with the help of the attached M18 Hellcat tank destroyers, the Americans are finally able to repel the German attackers when a heavy fog rolls in, disrupting German communications. It is the end of December 19th, and Desobry and Laprade meet up to discuss their next moves. However, a maintenance officer absentmindedly parks his recovery vehicle just outside of the American command post. German forward observers, aware that recovery vehicles are usually attached to headquarters sections, call an artillery fire on the American CP. Artillery fire crashes through the command post, killing Laprade instantly and severely wounding Desobry with a major head wound. Desobry is quickly loaded onto a jeep and rushed through the road to Bastogne, where he will hopefully be treated at the field hospital. However, his jeep driver is shocked to find an enemy patrol at the town of Foix on the way to Bastogne. Unbeknownst to Team Desobry, they have now been cut off, with the Germans occupying Foix behind them. However, the Germans, upon seeing Desobry's head wound, let the jeep pass through, and Desobry is treated at the American Field Hospital in Bastogne. However, that American Field Hospital will soon be overrun by German forces, and Desobry wakes up from his operation only to hear German voices around him. Team Desobry is now without their leader and completely cut off from friendly forces. However, they will maintain their defense and fight off countless enemy probing attacks throughout the night of December 19th. 5:30 a.m., December 20th, 1944. The Germans launched their largest artillery barrage yet, which turns Noville into rubble as another column of tanks approaches the American perimeter. 2 German tanks breach the front line and pierce all the way into the heart of Noville. However, a brave American bazooka team manages to disable it by firing multiple shots while on foot. The other tank is destroyed by a concealed Sherman within the town center. A Panther manages to push all the way to the town's schoolhouse, which Captain Billet is using as his command post. Captain Billet watches as the tank's main gun slowly swivels towards the window that he is standing at and says a quick prayer of deliverance when the barrel points directly at him. At exactly that moment, a Sherman rolls down the street and fires a shot into the side of the Panther, temporarily distracting it. The Panther rolls back onto a Jeep in an attempt to gain a better position and becomes stuck. In a panic, the tank's crew abandons the tank, and Captain Billet breathes a sigh of relief. At 1 p.m., after another day of repelling countless German attacks, the order is finally given to withdraw south to Bastogne. Team Desobry and 1st Battalion of the 101st Airborne form a quick column in order to escape the town under the cover of heavy fog. To clear the way, 3rd Battalion of 506 is sent to clear the village of Wacht on the way to Bastogne. 3rd Battalion does so and reaches Noville. The exhausted defenders, after 2 days of constant fighting, are finally able to withdraw back to Bastogne. However, before they can reach the town, the lead half-track in the column becomes suddenly stopped due to mechanical trouble, and the entire column forms a traffic jam as each vehicle crashes into the next. At that exact moment, 3 German tanks crest a surrounding ridge and begin to fire on the immobile column. What had been a rescue now turns into a slaughter. The German tanks ravage the column, which is completely defenseless on the road. In the chaos, a group of paratroopers from 3rd Battalion board an abandoned Sherman and, with no prior training, figure out how to traverse the turret, load a shell, and fire the main gun. They even learn how to reload and fire multiple shots into one of the German tanks until it is knocked out. The other 2 vehicles, upon seeing this, withdraw from the battle, and the Americans are finally left alone. The column of embattled GIs finally reaches Bastogne, and Colonel Robert Sink, commander of the 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment, shakes the hand of every man who comes through. Despite overwhelming odds, Team Desobry and 1st Battalion of the 506 have defended Noville for 2 days straight against constant German harassment. They have upset the timetable of the 2nd Panzer Division to the point where they could not capture Bastogne before the 101st arrived, and for that they played a critical role in maintaining the American control of Bastogne. At their peak strength, Team Desobry and 1st Battalion of the 506 had 798 men in their command, and they lost 275 for a casualty rate of 34%, along with 11 of the 15 tanks that they went to battle with. Lieutenant Colonel Laprade was killed in the fighting, and Major Desobry was severely wounded and captured. However, the outnumbered Americans still managed to inflict serious casualties on the 2nd Panzer Division. In total, the 2nd Panzer Division lost 20 tanks destroyed and another 25 seriously damaged. Additionally, an entire Panzer Grenadier battalion of 1,000 troops has been virtually wiped out by the American defenders. Most importantly, the stand of Team Desobry managed to delay the German advance in the Battle of the Bulge and prevented them from taking the key road junction at Bastogne. Major William Desobry would eventually be liberated from his prison camp in Germany in the spring of 1945 and would eventually be awarded the Silver Star for his actions at Noville. He would go on to several command postings in the next 30 years, including as Senior Advisor in Vietnam, Commanding General of 1st Armored Division, Commanding General of the U.S. Army Armor Center and School at Fort Knox, and Commanding General of 5th Corps in Germany, eventually retiring as Lieutenant General in 1975.